to Miriam to get us started.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the December 12th third insurance town hall that we have been lucky enough to co-host with Senator Allen. Our first insurance town hall was around legislation, and our second insurance town hall was around using modern technology and fire technology as a resource for building back in a more resilient way. Those conversations were interesting, and they yielded some priorities for us. Each of those calls yielded a series of priorities for us that we have been using to advocate for the community through the insurance world, through the landscape of insurance. As you all know, today you're going to be talking about resilience models that are community-wide versus just singular homes. But before I pass it off, I thought it might be useful if I were to review for all of you what we've found in our last two insurance town halls. So if I can share my screen just quickly, just to give you all a little bit of perspective as to what has gone before, so that A, you have that perspective going into this call, and B, you know that we do have output out of each one of these calls. We do aggregate the input that we get. We actually aggregate all the questions. We put out an FAQ, which is available and I can share with all of you. And so our hope is that every one of these town halls actually pushes the needle on insurability. So this was our very first one, which I believe was in August. This first one yielded for us 10 priorities. They included strengthening community advocacy, advancing legislative solutions, and as I say, the first one was legislation heavy, pushing for fair plan reform, which is something that we have already started talking about in our circles when we talk about Senator Allen's final legislative session coming around the corner. Some of the ideas that we might be able to pass through on behalf of the community, some of them do center around reform for the FAIR Plan. Encouraging innovative insurance models, ensuring coverage transparency, addressing economic inequities that are built into insurance as we speak, supporting local mitigation credits, and simplifying claims and appeals, which, as you all know, at least early after the disaster, was really a main point of contention for a lot of people. And then also reducing legal and administrative barriers, as well as integrating insurance with resilience planning. And that is what led to our second insurance town hall, which was more about resilience planning. And if you'll indulge me, I will share those top 10 priorities with you, because I think it'll set up this call very nicely. That was the one where we had fire technology on the call, and we learned a lot about what it takes to rebuild in a way that becomes insurable. And so those priorities became what makes a home more insurable after a wildfire. We talked about whether insurance discounts are available for home hardening. We talked about various levels of home hardening, which included IBHS standards, but also passive home standards, which was something new. And I think we'll dig a little deeper in that in the months to come. We talked about IBHS certification, whether or not it matters. I think you'll touch on that today because I think you have insurance back on the call. I think you have Mercury back on the call and they can talk about it. We talked about passive homes, whether that's relevant to wildfire recovery. Passive homes are inherently not for wildfire recovery. They are in order to make more energy efficient homes, but they can create a much more sealed envelope around a home. And so that could be that could be helpful with insurance. Fair Plan came up again, and then it was what was the difference between the admitted insurers as well as the surplus line carriers. That, I believe, is going to be the topic of our fourth insurance town hall. It'll be the risk assessors and the surplus line carriers. And then how can I make my home more coverable? How can renters lower their insurance fees? What are community resilience measures, which is what you're talking about today, and what can we do as a community to be more insurable? And that leads very nicely into today's town hall, which is to talk about the future of insurance, which I dare say is going to be a community model as much as it is an individual home model. So with that, I will hand it back over to you, Sophia, and I think this is going to be one of our more interesting town halls. And so I thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to pass it over to Senator Allen to give our first presentation.
Perfect. There you go. Okay. Excellent. Thank you, Sophia. Well, so good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. Obviously, big thanks to the Palisades Recovery Coalition and to Miriam for just being great partners through this process. As we've had having a whole series of discussions about the future of insurability and the recovery, broadly speaking, in the Palisades. So obviously we've heard so much from the very beginning about all the insurance related challenges that people have had. And of course, so much of our work has been just trying to help people um, get payouts from the insurance industry. We ended up running legislation on the topic, uh, and we know that there's massive current market imbalances in this area. The rates that we pay, uh, have continued to rise as people have been dropped, and now we're seeing so many people in the rebuilt area that are struggling to get basic insurance to help, with the financing of their rebuild. So, obviously fire prevention, climate risk reduction have been a really important part of some of the work that's been happening in the legislature right now. The passage of Prop 4 has allowed us to start to push out some money on wildfire resilience and vegetation management in the Santa Monica Mountains, et cetera. Some of the money's already being used from Proposition 4. But, obviously helping communities think about how to reduce risk is going to be an important part of this story as well. As was mentioned, lots of emerging, fire technologies that we're very interested in. The state's starting to look into investments, things like BurnBot, which is this automated robot on wheels that can trek into hard to reach areas to perform fire fuel reduction work. There's also a lot of private investments being made in firefighting drone technology, which could have the potential to play a big role in detecting fires earlier and then helping our aerial fighting fleet. So there's also a lot of software that's starting to roll out, in places like Marin and Truckee, other high fire risk zones where I've learned about apps that people have that help to remind folks about things that they can do and push out information about how to get financing, or hey, there's a red flag warning in your area. Bring in your outdoor furniture. Make sure your gutters are well cleared in the wake of the red flag warning that's coming. Or click here, because your city's doing a giveaway today for mesh screens that you can put up on your eaves. Those kinds of things that will help with hardening. We're also going to hear a little bit more today from insurers about how technology can be utilized to reduce risk and then incorporated into the broader insurance market strategy that we're working on. We spent a good deal of time this year in the legislature really trying to up the ante with regards to home hardening and community hardening efforts, special attention being, as I say, given to community approach to hardening rather than just individualized efforts, since we know that, even though you might individually do everything possible to harden your home, but if none of your neighbors are, you're still going to be seen as a risky potential recipient of an insurance policy from the insurance industry. One of the big incentive regulations, safer from wildfires, that we have updated through AB1, that just passed this year, provides insurance benefits to those who implement home hardening and defensible space around properties. We also paved a path for supporting more regular updates to these regulations to keep up with the latest and greatest practices and materials for home hardening that continue to inform the hardening process. We also, this year in the legislature, established a grant program to fund community hardening efforts with a particular focus on insurance deserts. That was AB 888 by Calderon. So, we're very interested in these hardening efforts. I just got a chance to go visit a neighborhood down in Escondido, along with the state fire marshal and the current insurance commissioner, which just showcased steps that a particular community is taking to reduce risk through the type of building materials that they employ, vegetation management, fire breaks, other types of tools. And because of these steps that they police pretty aggressively within the community, the insurers have stepped up to underwrite policies for this community. And we've actually got Victor from Mercury Insurance here that's actually insuring this neighborhood, even though this neighborhood's right in the very high fire risk zone. It's built up against the mountains down in Escondido. They took a look at the practices in the community and said, these practices are strong enough to make us feel comfortable insuring the community. And as a result, this community, each individual homeowner is spending thousands of dollars less per home on insurance rates than the neighborhood just next door. because the insurance company feels as though these fire risk reduction activities that are going on in the neighborhood are making a difference. And so that's certainly something that I think gives us a little bit of hope that we may be able to solve some of these macro challenges that exist in the insurance market. Obviously, more broadly speaking, that's a new development, so it's harder when we're talking about an existing one, especially as we ask people to harden their homes, individually. But there's good work happening here. I mean, there's the Firewise communities, which is helping, all sorts of communities around the state lower insurance costs. I know we've got the National Fire Protection Association that it's going to speak here on this Zoom to share a little bit more about the Firewise Communities program and how communities are working together to implement risk reduction activities that then help them get insurance discounts. We've also got we've got Firewise and also the California Fire Safe Council on with us today, and we also have some community leaders that are talking about how they've done some of this Firewise community work up in Topanga, how beneficial it's been for them, for their communities, and so that's an exciting piece of this conversation too. So, we this is a very, very difficult area of public policy, but one with are some emerging answers that we're trying to help spread the word, get some feedback, and see what we can do to scale. And I think certainly in the Palisades and Malibu areas that were burned, also Altadena, I'm really hopeful that we'll be able to incorporate some of this hardening activity, and then in return ask the insurers to step up and provide people with robust, real, affordable insurance. So thanks again to Dan and Victor for coming in and providing a critical insurance perspective on these discussions. I think that's an important part of the story too. I just appreciate everyone for jumping on. Happy to answer questions as it goes to our office's work on this topic, and just happy to be part of this discussion.
Thank you so much. All right, I'm going to pass it off to our National Fire Protection Association colleagues. So I see Michelle and Megan, and I'm going to unmute all of you right now.
Thank you very much, Sophia. Thank you so much for reaching out. Thank you, Senator Allen, for what you're doing for your district. My name is Michelle Steinberg. I'm the Wildfire Division Director at NFPA. I've been working in this space for more than 25 years and with NFPA for just under 25 years. We launched the Firewise USA program back in 2002 to engage people in their own safety and voluntarily working on this. Megan Fitzgerald McGowan from our group heads up the program nationally. Christina Rust from our team is our wildfire policy specialist. So I am not going to present fully. I just wanted to thank you very, very much for reaching out to us, and we're really happy to answer questions. But they have a good presentation, and I don't know who's going first, Megan or Christina, but I'll let them do that. Thank you so much. Are you able to share screens? No.
Megan Fitzgerald, you need a screen share? And Megan, you now
needs
have
to
it.
unmute.
Okay, Megan, you have screen share, and Christina, I shall give you your screen share as well. Should be good to go.
Great.
And it
Thank you
looks like
so much.
Megan needs some help unmuting as well.
I'm good now. We're set.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Are we seeing slides?
Yes, we are. Thank you.
Always exciting. So yep, real quick, just hi, I'm Megan Fitzgerald McGowan, the Firewise USA Program Manager at NFPA, and I'm going to give some more details about the Firewise program here soon, but I am going to turn it over to Christina just to give a brief introduction about NFPA, in case some of you haven't heard of us before.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Megan. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Christina Rust. I'm the Wildfire Policy Specialist here at the National Fire Protection Association. And we're really, really grateful to have an opportunity to share more about Firewise. So we want to just extend our thank you again for having us. It means a lot to be able to share this with you all. So first, we want to give a little more context as to who NFPA is and what our work in wildfire looks like. NFPA was founded in 1896, and we're a global nonprofit dedicated to eliminating death, injury, property, and economic loss from fire, electrical, and related hazards. And we support the development and implementation of codes and standards, conduct research, offer trainings and certifications, provide public education, and perform outreach and advocacy. Next slide, please. So, how did NFPA actually get into the wildfire space? It goes back to almost 100 years ago. The picture on the right shows one of our standards from 1935 for summer homes in forested areas. And the title might seem pretty silly to us now, but what it shows us is that even then we understood the idea that structures are at risk of fire anywhere. And then later, NFPA became more formally involved in the concept of WUI risk reduction in 1985, when the idea of the wildland-urban interface was formally recognized at the national level. Next slide. So all of that to say, this leads us to our present work in the Wildfire Division. The NFPA Wildfire Division facilitates multiple programs, and here's some of our top 3 things that we work on. We have our Wildfire Community Preparedness Day every year in May. We have Outthink Wildfire, which is our policy initiative, and then Firewise USA, which I'll throw back to Megan to explain a little bit more for you all.
Thank you, Christina. All right, so what is Firewise USA? I'm sure there are some of you on the call who are engaged in the program. Maybe you are participating or you support in some way, shape, or form. But the program has been around a while, and so the understanding of what the program is has evolved over the years, and many people have an understanding, but it's not always fully accurate or doesn't always align with how we at NFPA perceive it or put it out there. So in a more formal definition, Firewise USA is a recognition program, not a certification. It is voluntary, and within it, we provide a framework to help residents get organized, find direction, and take action to increase the ignition resistance of their homes and community. And what does that mean? One of our older taglines was, neighbors helping neighbors, and that's what it really is. So this is a voluntary program that helps bring people together to take individual action around their own home and property, but to then work cross-boundary with their neighbors, because when we look at a neighborhood, if we use the home ignition zone model or defensible space or any of those things that have a measurement of like 0 to 5 or 5 to 30, often that number might cross into your neighbor's property. So you affect your neighbor and your neighbor affects you. And so you need to work together. And that's what this program is really all about. It's how do we bring the social science into this wildfire work, and how do we get folks to work together? It has been around since 2002. It started with 12 original pilot sites. Michelle was around for the beginning. I was not with NFPA at that time, but 9 of those are still active across the country. It was developed under a partnership between NFPA, the U.S. Forest Service, the Department of the Interior, so bringing in some of those other federal agencies, and then the National Association of State Foresters. And that's what connects us then to our state partners who help to implement and facilitate at the local level. And the whole goal of this program was, how can we prevent the destruction of homes during a wildfire event? So, these land management organizations recognizing that wildfires are going to happen, they're happening on the landscape, and now they were starting to see this mix of wildfires and built environment and those negative impacts. So really trying to figure out what could be done to help decrease those impacts. So at the end of the fire, maybe that community is there. We want people to be able to stay in their homes, to return home. It also is a way to, if these homes aren't igniting and not burning, then we're not looking at some of those other ecosystem impacts. We know that can be really bad on so many levels, and there's all these downstream effects. So really, the way it evolved was, how can we really help tackle these issues in this built environment so we can continue to have strong communities? And it is something that is based in science. It's not just, what does NFPA think? What does the Forest Service think? The recommendations that we provide on our website align with science originally started by Jack Cohen and others, continued on by other organizations across the US, including IBHS. We do work with them, but we also connect with NIST. We connect with researchers at universities, really trying to understand, again, the social science, the physical science, the wildfire science, all those things, really acknowledging fire does not engulf everything in its path. It is the principles of combustion that impact whether or not a home will burn, and that there are things that individuals can do to alter their structure and their immediate area. And again, that idea of why we of working together. It really is about how do we encourage individual responsibility, and then how do we encourage neighbors to work together with that shared responsibility. It is voluntary. So we hear questions, concerns. Well, hey, what about our area? We have local codes or local inspection programs. If we do Firewise, what about those things? Again, Firewise is that organizing framework to help bring people together. But if you have local things on the books, those are the laws and the rules that you have to follow. But maybe people will coalesce around them more in this organized fashion if they're participating in Firewise. We have heard feedback from other communities participating across the country that the work that they are doing has made a difference when they have had an incident, and not only helping it be more safe for them maybe to evacuate, but also providing an opportunity for first responders to be able to protect homes, to engage with the fire in their areas. So it is this way to really demonstrate that you're bending down that risk, you're taking action. Participation, again, since 2002, we've had enormous growth from those original 12 communities. We're currently just over 3,300, over 1,400 in California. And in this last year, we have seen significant growth in California, Oregon, and Arizona. Well, with growth, are people doing things? And yes, they are. This is always a fun slide to share, kind of the breakdown of the numbers. So last year in California, you guys had over 1,000 active communities, over 400 joined in that calendar year, or over 300 joined in that calendar year. And numbers wise, I think this is more nationwide, but over 293 million was invested, 3.5 million volunteer hours worked. These are self-reported by communities. Could be individuals sharing, here's what I did on my property, or maybe a community is just gathering a rough estimate of a total, or they're capturing it in some other way. They're also telling us what they spent on things. So whether it's through an HOA, fees that they collect that they then spend on chippers, or people pulling their money together, people getting a grant, they're doing a lot of work. So participating in Firewise is just also another way to help gather that data. Those who are the community leaders are in the portal. They can pull reports and gather these numbers for their community to share. But if you're going after grants or trying to make a case for why a state, local government should invest in your area, being organized, demonstrating what you're already doing can be a great way to make a case for, we take this seriously, we're doing a lot of work, but we need some support. And just that reminder of how it flows. NFPA is national. We set the criteria, we manage the portal, but we really depend on our state partners in California at CAL FIRE. They do the reviews of the applications before they send them on to us. They are trying to help connect people with either local CAL FIRE units or fire safe councils or other nonprofits and partners at the local level who are there to assist with risk assessments, walkthroughs, coming to a meeting, all those different things. And anyone on this diagram can start a community. We really want it to be led by that neighborhood, HOA, group of homes. It's about them, their property, what they can control, but it is everyone working together. And there is a whole process to join. So you need to be organized. You need to have a formal board or committee. You need to complete a risk assessment. You need to set a boundary. We want that to be an inclusive, contiguous boundary, a minimum of 8 homes, a maximum of 2,500. What we've seen lately in California is people really wanting to tightly draw their boundary only around the people that they've talked to or that have said they want to participate. But remember, this is a voluntary program based in social science. And when you're really exclusive in that way of not opening up to everyone in your neighborhood, not including all of them, that doesn't help your community grow and be engaged. So we just want to encourage, if you're interested and there's 50 homes, but maybe there's some in the middle that you haven't talked to yet, it's okay to draw the boundary. That's how it has worked since 2002 across the country when communities have joined in. And part of your action plan is you just keep doing that outreach and you keep growing that participation. Communities do have to have an action plan, and it's self-guided. We're not coming out to measure your community against your action plan, like, oh, did you check off this, this, and this? It's really, though, to help you and your neighbors see, like, what's our baseline starting point, and how do we keep going each year, and how do we build on the activities we've done in the past to keep making measurable progress, because those are things that everyone wants to see. We don't want folks to get real comfortable with, we host a wine and a cheese party and we have a meeting and we all talk and then we have a chipper day, and that's all we do. And we've heard stories like that from across the country. So we have plans, we have assessments, they have to be updated. There's work that has to be done. Communities have to make that investment, but it's not writing NFPA a check. It's not sending us anything. It's investing in yourselves, investing in your homes, investing in your neighborhood. And then you tell us about it on the portal. And one of the key things to the program, and I'm just about to get to insurance because I know that's a question, is the question. To stay in the program, you have to report and do things every year. It's not a one and done. Oh, we checked off that piece of paper. Now we get our insurance discount. We're good. We don't have to think about this again. Again, Firewise USA is that framework about bringing people together, and it's meant to help people understand that you live where wildfires happen. This is a way of life. They're not going to go away. There's work to do every year. Some of it's big, one and done actions, but a lot of it's maintenance, and there's always things to do. You have a windstorm, you might have to go clean up again. You know, oh, we've had some drought. Let's make sure that we're cleaning stuff up, we're creating space. Oh, we had a really wet season, now everything is grown, time to trim stuff back. It is annual commitment to risk reduction efforts. So insurance, oh, always the question. And Christina and Michelle, as I go through, if I miss something or you want to chime in, please do. But I do want to start out by framing this. NFPA is not sponsored by, nor was it funded by the insurance, founded by the, no, yeah, we're not sponsored by or funded by the insurance industry, but we do have specific efforts where we work together. And Firewise USA was not developed for insurance purposes. It was really community risk reduction, social behavior change. However, it was included in the California Department of Insurance Safer from Wildfires regulation. And prior to that, there was one insurance company across many Western states who was recognizing their members in Firewise communities as, hey, that's making a difference there. We're going to provide our members a discount. So it's not unheard of, but we were included in that regulation. And because we are trying to work with the industry to meet the demand for verification purposes. We do that through data licensing with companies that service the insurance industry. We provide a data set of those boundaries. They provide an opportunity for companies to be able to do, is this address in a Firewise location? Yes, no, make that determination. We don't control the incentive that they offer, how much it is, what percentage, but you know, we are constantly working to see how can we improve how we're working with the industry. In the past, it's been a twice-a-year update. I believe for 2025, we're going to manage to get in 3 updates to the industry, and we're looking at more in 2026 as we also implement new resources, new tools to help us capture those boundaries in a better fashion. And you know, we do have some information about that on our website, so I will pause there. I think I'm done with my slides. I said a lot of things, but you know, there's a lot of things going on out there, and there's a lot of innovation, new technologies emerging, and those are all good, and they have a role to play, but Firewise is longstanding. It is about how do we get communities to be engaged. And we firmly believe that those individual property and community-wide mitigation efforts are the place to start, and then but also incorporating technology into that. So I think I'm at our 15. Thank you. And we look forward to questions during the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Megan. Appreciate it. I'm going to pass it off to Julia from California Fire Safe Council to do the next presentation. I'm unmuting you now. And do you need screen sharing capabilities as well.
Perfect.
You should now be able to share your screen.
Okay. Go ahead here. Just give me 1 second. Okay. Can everybody see my slides? All
Yes, we
right.
can.
Thank you. Well, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm Julia Marcelli. I'm the Senior Manager for Wildfire Programs and Grants with the California Fire Safe Council. I'm very excited to go after Megan because I think I'm going to be reinforcing a lot of what she talked about with Firewise communities, and hopefully also addressing how Firewise communities and Fire Safe Councils are working together to mitigate community level risk. So just a little bit about CFSC. We really began as an arm of CAL FIRE in 1993 before becoming our own 501c3 organization. We call ourselves CFSC. Again, that's the California Fire Safe Council. We provide funding and build programs in support of community-based mitigation and preparedness. We do this through 3 primary activities. So that is grant funding. We serve as a pass-through entity where we receive state, federal, and private funds and pass that through to not only local fire safe councils, but Firewise communities, HOAs, county governments and agencies, special districts like resource conservation districts, cities, and everyone in between. We also provide programmatic support to foster strong networks of local leaders so that they can share best practices and collaborate and facilitate peer-to-peer learning. And then we provide technical assistance and expertise on the administration and execution of grant funding and projects. So while we really began as a grants clearinghouse and a grant pass-through, we have evolved into a comprehensive resource for wildfire resilience through county level coordination and by supporting high-risk communities as they build their own resilience. We truly believe that community resilience starts from the ground up. So since 2004, when we became a nonprofit organization, we have funded over $140 million to 1,200 projects serving 400 communities across the state. And this has also included the creation, we've directly supported the creation of 400 community wildfire protection plans, or CWPPs, in that time period, developed over 36,000 educational materials, and supported 1,600 defensible space projects across the state. So quite wide-reaching since 2004. I wanted to talk for a moment about what is a Fire Safe Council. Many of you, I'm sure, are familiar. We just heard about what a Firewise community is, but what is a Fire Safe Council? Fire Safe Councils are really grassroots, community-led organizations that mobilize residents to protect their homes and communities from catastrophic wildfire. They educate, they inform, they support project implementation and planning efforts, and act as a neighborhood catalyst for change. They may also serve as fiscal sponsors to support hyperlocal projects, often Firewise communities, so that they can receive their own grant funding. Many, for example, Firewise communities are truly volunteer-led. They're not a 501c3 organization, so they can't go after their own grant funds. However, they can work through a fiscal sponsor like a Fire Safe Council to be able to get the grant funds to implement their projects. We are not a certifying body. We do not certify local fire safe councils. We do not say who can and who cannot be a fire safe council. They truly are community-led organizations in that anyone at any time can start a fire safe council and really form it the way that is most necessary to support their individual community's needs. So we have currently 300 plus fire safe councils across California and growing almost every day. These fire safe council structures really vary across the state. So you're going to see a wide array of what these fire safe councils look like if you look at the state from top to bottom. So some of them are county-wide organizations. Some of them are more local or even regional. Some are programs of the county's Board of Supervisors or a project of the county's Resource Conservation District. So really varies across the state what exactly this looks like. So I was invited here to talk today about what CFSC is doing to reduce risk in communities, which is what, of course, ultimately improves insurability. So we have developed this concept of a fire safe communities program model. It's been in development for about the last year, and it's really the direction that we're moving strategically as an organization when we're looking at the programs and the projects that we're funding. So the Fire Safe Communities program aims to intervene within communities at multiple scales with tested preparedness and mitigation activities. So this program really takes a holistic approach to ensuring that communities stand a better chance of surviving catastrophic wildfire by supporting a suite of connected resiliency bolstering activities, as opposed to spot funding random acts of mitigation, which I will say we have been guilty of in the past. The intent of this model is really to collate the local needs and voices, provide direct mitigation and education services, and connect it all together upward to state-level strategies and priorities to really build a holistic bottom-up program. We believe that approaching mitigation via this wraparound model will be what ultimately reduces risk and in turn increases insurability. While one hardened home in a community won't increase community survivability and decrease insurance costs, a community wrapped in mitigations from the forests and the canyons inward is what exemplifies true resilience and risk reduction. So of course, you have on this model on the screen your traditional defensible space. So this would be the parcel level efforts that we have been funding for many years. You have your home hardening and retrofits program, your community mitigation. So these are projects that we are funding to protect critical community infrastructure and do landscape level field breaks around the community. Your forest health initiatives to improve the health of ecosystems, evacuation planning to protect lives in the event that a fire does occur. Outreach and education, of course, and then your community capacity building to really build the capacity of local fire safe councils, firewise communities, and other community-based organizations so that they're sustainable in the long run and they can go out and get more funding and do more projects than just what we are able to fund. I want to highlight just a couple of these. I don't have time to talk about all of our initiatives through this Fire Safe Communities program, but the first that I wanted to talk about, because it's probably most directly correlated with what we're talking about today, is our home hardening pilot program. So we launched this pilot program last year in Santa Barbara and Ventura counties, so through the Santa Barbara Fire Safe Council and the Ventura Fire Safe Council. And these two fire safe councils really kicked off this program through community focus groups, talking with members in their community about what they know about home hardening, what their home hardening needs are, and really prioritizing this at the community level. They are doing home assessments across their communities, and then also ultimately performing home retrofits in their communities. So the ultimate goal with this pilot program is for the California Fire Safe Council, along with our partners in Santa Barbara and Ventura, to develop a framework for a comprehensive home retrofit program that can launch across the state. And this is a program that would be available to fire safe councils, firewise communities, community-based organizations. So this isn't intended to replace the state's home hardening initiatives. This is really intended to support local community-based organizations with building their own home hardening programs. I refer to it as home hardening in a box. So we are working with these two pilot communities to be able to put that framework together. We certainly see the connection, as all of you do as well, that home hardening and associated defensible space activities are really key to lowering risk and are key components of insurance companies increasingly reevaluating their risk models and exploring ways to evaluate risk at a parcel scale. So this pilot program is really just the start of our entry into the home hardening space. We will actually soon be announcing an additional pilot program with an insurance industry partner to support more communities, provide assessments, retrofit homes, and collect really critical data. And then next, I wanted to talk about our Wildfire County Coordinator program. So we see this program as really the piece that brings the fire safe communities concept together. The County Coordinator program is funded by CAL FIRE, has been funded by CAL FIRE and administered by CFSC since 2021. And it really arose out of the need, this recognition that there were so many amazing community-based organizations across the state doing incredible work, but because of the nature of the work, often volunteer driven, they're competing with each other with funds. This community space really became heavily siloed. Even within individual counties, groups within counties didn't know what their neighbors next door were working on, didn't know what similar groups or other fire safe councils or RCDs, what types of projects they had happening in the space. So we recognize this need to place a county wildfire coordinator at that county level who can really serve as a hub and figure out what's going on within their community. So this funding provided for one county level coordinator in counties across California. We currently have 47 placed across the state, and their goal is really to implement wildfire resilience strategies on the ground and develop community collaboration and coordination among existing groups. So this is not an authoritative position. They are not the county wildfire authority. They are really there as a hub to de-silo the space in their counties and connect and bring groups together to share resources and be more effective ultimately on the ground. So you can imagine a statewide program like this, in order to actually work, has to look very different in every county. They have to be able to meet the unique needs of their county. So all of our county coordinators are acting as that hub of county mitigation efforts, that resource hub. They're taking a census of who's doing what and where, who's who in the space within their county. Oftentimes they're acting as regional coordinators of Firewise communities and helping to support these Firewise communities in that capacity. They are engaging local organizations as fiscal sponsors and in many cases securing funding for projects, building data sets and tracking local mitigation efforts. And as I said before, just generally de-siloing the space, connecting those groups, building bridges across partners, hosting convenings, and sharing resources. And we really at CFSC feel like the county is a really good scale for a program like this because these county coordinators have their finger on the pulse of what's happening within their counties. It's a small enough scale that they're able to engage local partners and connect local strategy with state and even federal efforts. So they're really bridging that gap between these local initiatives, local priorities, and what's happening with state and federal partners. So we see them as a key piece of the puzzle moving forward to help drive community level risk mitigation and ensure that leaders and the people that are making decisions are actually listening and hearing the unique perspectives and needs of communities. So just some outcomes for you on this slide. You can see our county coordinators since 2021 have secured over $85 million of funding for local mitigation and preparedness projects in their counties. So it's a really big return on investment for a relatively low investment. It was originally $175,000 to fund these county coordinators for 18 months. We have now expanded the program and we have funding through at least 2028 to continue the program. They've also helped to support the implementation of over 100 new Firewise communities and fire safe councils across the state. So to wrap it up and bring it all together, CFSC's long-term vision is to really build upon the existing program infrastructures to create a mechanism for local execution of state strategy that is tailored to meet local needs. We want to operationalize the state's wildfire and forest resilient action plan and other state level goals at the county level to ensure that it is in sync with county and local priorities. And you don't just have state leaders doing the things that state leaders do without the input from their local communities. We want to move toward county level planning and project prioritization, accelerate, of course, home hardening, defensible space, and public education, standardize data collection, and ultimately improve public safety and community insurability in California's highest risk regions. So just some ways that you can support, and here is where I'm really going to reiterate what Megan said about this being community driven and community led. Stay community aware, commit to building an understanding of efforts happening in your local community, get involved. Many of these efforts are volunteer driven. If you don't help, who will? Participate in the local program and initiatives and encourage your neighbors to participate as well. If a fire safe council comes knocking to do a home hardening assessment in order to get resources to harden homes in your community, please participate. Hey, don't shut the door on them. And then, of course, understanding the need for a wraparound approach. A hardened home with poor defensible space may still not survive a wildfire. Similarly, a community of hardened homes backing to an unhealthy forest landscape is also unlikely to survive a wildfire. So, thinking about this in a more holistic way with this wraparound approach of wrapped mitigations instead of these random acts of mitigations happening across the state. And then, of course, engaging neighbors, sharing knowledge and resources. And you can learn more about these programs at the California Fire Safe at cafiresafecouncil.org. And I really appreciate the opportunity to speak today. I'll end with a picture of our most recent gathering of county coordinators that we had in Sacramento in November. So you can see these are folks representing the entire state who are really truly engaged and want to hear from their local partners. So please visit our website, find your county coordinator if there's one there, and connect with them.
Thank you so much, Julia. So now we're going to move to our insurers that are here to hear their perspective on both community-based initiatives around insurance and also how fire tech is being incorporated into their models. I'm going to pass it off to Dan Preston.
Fantastic. Thank you. I'll apologize in advance. I'm overcoming a cold, so my voice might be a little odd. So thank you for understanding. And thank you, Senator Allen and Sophia, for putting all this together. And thank you for the FireWise community. I actually live in a FireWise community, so it was exciting to hear about it. So Stand, we're a property insurance company. We started the company about 2 years ago now, and we're built specifically for places that are becoming harder to insure. So we partner directly with homeowners, help them make their properties resilient. And then through that, that allows us to be able to reward them with both availability and affordability in insurance. So the way that it works as a customer coming to Stand to get insured is we work with them by first measuring the physical risk of an individual structure at the kind of engineering physical level. So this is the structure, the materials, terrain, wind, vegetation around the home. And second, we don't just price the risk. We're actually actively helping our customers reduce that by balancing three things: aesthetics, cost, and safety. And so we help homeowners harden their homes, and we then reflect that in the risk reduction directly into more availability, better coverage, and more affordable pricing. So the goal isn't to avoid the risky homes in California and other places that are exposed to wildfire, but it's to actually help directly align everyone towards the same goal, which is an insurer that can actually measure the impact of the resilience that's being implemented. It's capital partners and reinsurers in our case that support that, and then reward homeowners for reducing that risk. So the way that Stan works kind of under the hood, we look at wildfire risk at an individual property level, kind of as an engineer might look at that. So we simulate these events on the individual structures, not just by looking backwards at the historical claims for what we've seen in the past that's incorporated, but most importantly, we're incorporating our view of what would happen in the future by simulating things like wildfire on that structure. And so that's incorporating things like ember exposure, wind-driven fire behavior, slope, building materials. All of that is incorporated into that model. And then we work with a homeowner to look at the blueprint that comes from that. So once we've simulated that home, it allows us to identify what are the specific vulnerabilities in the property. And we work with a homeowner one-on-one to design the home to be resilient. Naturally, one of the biggest challenges is not only being able to decide what makes a property resilient, but also balancing what's important to that homeowner about the property. And so it requires a careful understanding not only of the individual risks, whether that's defensible space, vents, roofs, siding, fencing, et cetera, but also what's important to the homeowner. I think our second or third customer had an olive tree that their grandfather planted maybe 50, 60 years ago that was really important to them. And it sat in a vulnerable area next to the home that was challenging from a defensible space perspective. But we were able to protect that tree by making changes to the siding and the windows, and then creating enough distance from some of the other vegetation that would reduce the impact of that olive tree on the home. And so this kind of customization for a homeowner is critical in that it allows a homeowner to actually feel like A, their home is protected, but that the insurer is also balancing that with what's important and creates value for that homeowner and what they're living in today. And from our perspective, this is about how you're ultimately able to provide insurance in places where homeowners might be resistant to actually taking some of these actions. How do you embed the understanding of wildfire risk with the empathy for the homeowner and the changes, both the cost and the aesthetic impact? From a community perspective, one of the most challenging parts of helping a homeowner create a resilient home is the distance to their neighbor's home. If that home is on fire, typically it'll be really challenging to save your home. So we've done a lot of deep work on these urban conflagration events, in particular things like the Palisades fires, and looking backwards at how these simulations perform in those types of events. And they can be really challenging. They can even produce their own weather. And in these cases, you have to be able to understand the dynamics of how community might have to make changes to be able to protect individual homes or the whole community. So we are particularly thrilled to see the energy around community mitigation. I think the impacts of some of these initiatives are going to, I think, be incredibly impactful. The core challenge, I think, for insurers to reward that is historically we have to wait for these wildfires to happen to then see how those actions then perform in the real world. This is kind of the nature of insurance in many ways. Prices are largely produced based on a backwards looking view of what has happened in the past. And so from our perspective, we don't want to have to wait for a wildfire to start to see how well these types of actions can work and how much risk reduction actually is created by taking those actions. And so fortunately, these simulations can do that. It allows us to see how these really intense wildfires can create different types of weather that can propagate from home to home and across full landscapes. And that measurement in advance then allows us to be able to incorporate that directly into the insurance pricing, which opens up capacity and availability and also allows us to reduce pricing and make it more affordable to homeowners. Our view ultimately is that this rebuilding needs to be approached at like a neighborhood and block level. Every homeowner takes an important role in that as well. And ultimately, insurance availability needs to increasingly reflect this type of collective action. And ultimately, communities that do plan and rebuild together with resilience built in day one will perform better and ultimately have better access to insurance and lower prices. Last thing I'll add is one of the really exciting things I think we're seeing today is there's an enormous amount of innovation and invention in the wildfire resilience and prevention space, from sensors, detection, modeling, suppression, better materials. And we work with many of these companies today and learn every day about new ideas. But just like some of the challenges associated with forms of resilience and community management, the biggest challenge is understanding how well it works. So if a technology can demonstrably reduce loss, it should, of course, impact insurance costs and increase availability. And so what we're doing today is we're working with some of these companies now in something we kind of think of as like internally as like a virtual stand lab. And the idea here is that it allows us to incorporate through the data that this technology provider has directly into the future view of the simulation or what would happen on the landscape if you implemented that form of technology. And that means that we can then prospectively actually incorporate the benefit of that technology into the insurance pricing and ultimately availability as well. And we're really excited about what that can mean. And so our goal ideally is to accelerate this transition, both the availability of insurance and frankly, just a more resilient world in California. And at the end of the day, the most proximate economic stakeholder in wildfire is insurance right now. And if we do this right and align the incentives appropriately, we better understand scientifically the way that these technologies and mitigation can impact insurance, it should be an enormously beneficial force for driving change across California by directly rewarding the efforts for resilience and actively helping customers identify which actions they should take through the research and support they can provide them. I just want to emphasize how important it is I think, for insurers to do more than just price and transfer risk. I think they actively have to help their customers make these homes resilient and make it a cost-effective, aesthetically conscious effort that makes a homeowner want to take the actions both to reduce their costs and to have a safe home. So that's a bit about Stand, and really excited to have been here. So thank you for having us.
Great. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. I'm going to pass it off to Victor. Thank you again for being part of this. Our second time you've been joined, I'm going to give you, I'm going to allow you to unmute
Victor
right
now, yes, Victor now has co-host status. He may share his screen.
I have nothing to share on my screen, but I'm happy to be here again. And I think I'll spend my time talking more about community risk. I know that in the prior event I attended, I believe I went over some of the discounts Mercury offers in pretty deep detail. I do still see some questions in the chat on that, so I can just answer a couple of them really quickly. There were some questions about the impact of Firewise on discounts. Every company's different. But for Mercury, that's 5%. That's a 5% reduction. It might not sound as significant as what you would hope to see, but as the individuals from the NFPA said, we don't really look at Firewise in and of itself as something that would materially, significantly reduce the risk. It's really more about what the community is doing through that and evaluating the results of the investments in mitigation, whether it's in the fuels or in the homes or other elements of risk that are part of the community. So it's a good thing to see, but I don't want people to look at Firewise and say, hey, if we're only giving a 5% discount, why do it? I really think that's the point of it. It's more about creating the proper vehicle to drive change at a larger scale or at a faster pace. Now, I talked again last time about what we were doing in terms of individual home discounts. There's some questions about how much we'll pay for different things. I'll talk about that at the end. I'll give some estimates just to give you a sense of how Mercury looks at it. But I think it's probably helpful for this town hall for me to talk more about how we look at communities at large. And I think to do that, I'll probably talk about three different communities that come to mind when I think about how they achieved really good results from a wildfire standpoint and now how that's being reflected in the rates that are offered to them. So the first one, um, and I do think it's a town that for those of you in the Palisades who have maybe the opportunity at some point to visit, you should, which is Paradise. And Paradise, obviously, as you know, went through a very traumatic event years ago, back in 2018. But as they've rebuilt, it's been really impressive to see what they've done. So, looking at it from a community standpoint, they have quite a bit of structure spacing that's not achievable in a lot of other areas. So, it matters. Our discounts are steeper when we see that. But again, that's not necessarily achievable, especially if you live in the Alphabet section of the Palisades. Beyond that, they have very, very strong town enforcement. I mean, when you're driving through Paradise, you will see cars that are part of the municipal effort to make sure that the wildfire resilience is really being adhered to at the parcel level or at other levels. And it's really reflected when you drive around and look at the homes there. The homes there have very high building standards. So what we like to see at Mercury is 7A standards. You can Google that and take a look at what those standards mean and what they involve. But you're really talking about some of the things Dan mentioned earlier, such as exterior property features, vents, siding, windows, doors, roof, etc. And we feel that homes that are built to that standard are going to fare very well compared to the vast majority of the homes we've seen lost with our customers in the past decade. We don't see a lot of Chapter 7A homes get lost in comparison. Now, in addition to that, I would say that what we would tack onto it, and this is really important for the community too, is having sections of fencing or walls that run throughout the community that ideally, at least near their homes, are not combustible. And I think if you go a step further and think about it at the community level, building in areas where you have continuous runs of fencing and replacing them with a block wall or something that's not combustible allows you to create these sort of local miniaturized fire breaks or fuel breaks of sorts, because you could see this in places like Altadena after the fire when we toured it. You would see pockets of homes that survived that were just downwind of a cinder block wall. And if you kind of think about what a cinder block wall would do when you have an ember cast, it creates some level of protection that reduces the propagation of embers downwind because it literally blocks them. Although the winds on that night in Altadena, as they got into the community, were very low to the ground. You're not always going to have that. So Paradise, I think, has some very interesting things again in terms of structure separation, enforcement within the community. They'll clear out properties in terms of some of the defensible space and put a lien on the house if they have to. They do not mess around with those kinds of things. So they really enforce the importance of moving forward together as a community. Another one I'll talk about, which Senator Allen spoke to earlier, is the Dixon Trails community in Escondido. This is a smaller community of about 60 homes. We met with the builder, KB Homes, we feel they took a chance on building a community to that standards. The homes in that community are a little bit further apart, which I think when you're a builder, you have to consider what are the downsides to that, because in many cases, some builders are really looking to obviously maximize the amount of homes that they can fit into an area. So for them, that meant, okay, we can't necessarily fit as many homes. Maybe this is going to be a model that works better ultimately for the homeowners and for insurance companies as they look at their options. So we decided to take a chance on that community because we felt they were taking a chance. When you look at the features, the mitigation standards in the community, as Senator Allen said, they're pretty high, pretty substantial. They're built to the IBHS Plus standard. Probably the only place I can think of where every home in the community is built to that standard. At the same time, I do want to emphasize we do not view that standard as necessary for homes and communities to have both available and affordable insurance. We think there are many ways to get there. Paradise does not meet that standard either. And the last community I'll talk about they will never meet that standard. But they have been tested and they did very well in a fire that I would say in some ways is similar to the fire that destroyed parts of the Palisades. So again, with Dixon Trail, you have structure spacing, you have Chapter 7A construction, and even a little bit beyond that with the fencing. You have defensible space that is pretty much cleared out in the 0 to 5 foot zone. Every time I talk about that, I always make a point to make it clear that Mercury does not believe that you have to have a completely clear so-called zone 0. I know that is a very controversial topic. For whatever it's worth, we're just one company. We are fine with vegetation in certain forms of certain sizes in zone 0, as long as the home itself has been hardened. And I would really stress to everyone as you building back with the right materials, the right standards, again, that 7A standard, that will make things a lot easier moving forward. It is a lot harder to retrofit things after the fact. So as you build back, really encourage you to take a serious look at that. If you do that for companies like us, you have a lot more flexibility when it comes to vegetation in zone 0, so that you don't have to feel like you have to resort to having nothing but hardscape or some moonscape that may not be aesthetically appealing. We are sensitive to that. We do not think it's necessary to do that. There is more than one way to get there. And to sort of demonstrate part of why we feel that way, I'll talk about the last community. This is a community called Orchard Hills in Irvine. It's a community in the northern edge of it. And back in 2020, during the height of the pandemic, there was a fire called the Silverado Fire. There were 80-mile-an-hour winds that pushed that fire very, very quickly into Irvine, and Orchard Hills was right on the front of that. The fire response to that fire was somewhat limited to some extent because there was a lot going on at the time, and the pandemic itself complicated the understanding of how to position firefighters and to maintain distance. This was in 2020, right? So this is really during the height of that uncertainty. Now, with Orchard Hills, you have this community that is entirely built to 7A standard. The homes are not that far apart, so think about what you see in the alphabet section of the Palisades. But 7A, They had some requirements around vegetation. They did not have a clear zone zero, but they had requirements on how they managed the vegetation, the types of plants, how they were maintained. And one of the big things they had that is really important is they had large fuel modification zones around the communities, which reduced the significance and the magnitude of the embers that were hitting the community. They also had some barriers around the community which were designed specifically with embers in mind. They had, this is a bit harder to do here, but they had actually elevated the community as they were thinking about developing it with fire in mind. So they really built it from the ground up to be ready for a wildfire. But it's a beautiful community. The homes are close together. So that to me is a good example of where I would say you have options, I think, as a community in how you think about how to get to that ultimate desirable state of being resilient against wildfire. But where I don't think you have options is in the construction itself. I think the homes have to be built in certain ways, but we know those things. Those things are proven. The 7A standards came back into effect, I think, in 2008. So this has been around for some time. But there are other things that we've learned over time, and I think we'll continue to learn more and we'll get better. Now, I think that I'll get to those questions later. But one other thing I want to tackle that I was asked to speak about is maybe emerging things that we think are interesting and where people should prioritize their dollars when rebuilding. So I talked about 7A. I would say just generally here, and this relates a bit to the fire tech. You don't need the latest, greatest active interventions to protect your home or your community. I've seen a lot of things personally, very complex networks of hoses, sprinklers, drones, acoustic systems that use sound to put out the fire, fire blankets, or even, I would say, a catapult that you can put into the community that throws giant water balloons to try to put out the fire immediately. These things can help. I mean, they're interesting things, but I personally don't think you really need any of this stuff. I think that we've seen really bad fires hit communities that have very boring, straightforward work that's been done to them on the structures and some good work that's been done in the defensible space. Again, not completely clear. And then importantly, zooming a little bit further out, they've done good things in the chaparral. And Senator Allen mentioned BurnBot. We went up to Tahoe and saw some work that had been done in Tahoe with BurnBot. And in 2 days, the fire service had cleared an area that would otherwise have taken them 2 weeks. No, 3 days. 3 days. That's still an amazing difference, though. I think they cleared 22 acres in 3 days, and normally with hand crews, it would have taken them 2 weeks. So we like technology that I think allows us to do the basic things at scale, more quickly, more cost effectively. BurnBot has these masticators, these things that chop up the fuel that can work more quickly than people can. But they're not banking everything on something that requires in the moment electricity or water pressure or things that may fail. Those aren't things that we think are really necessary because we've seen bad fires and we've seen communities survive. Orchard Hills didn't lose a single home. I mean, that to me is an incredible result. And the individual who had worked with Orchard Hills to plan the community, the individual who worked in the fire service on the fire prevention team, he drove to that fire and I think just kind of sat there and he told us he just watched it. He just watched it come up to the community and basically fizzled because he knew he had sort of won the battle before it had even begun because of the work they had done in the field modification around the community and the construction. And again, it's a beautiful community. It's not a bunch of moonscapes. So I think those kinds of stories are really amazing to us. And I think getting to some of the questions I think people really want answered because I see a lot of questions about, like, show me the money. What does this mean in terms of money? I can give you some general ranges as we look at how Mercury prices things. These are very general. Every home is going to be priced differently. Every home is underwritten individually. But I would say that homes where you have the community taking some action, you have good standards on the homes themselves. Talking about rebuilds, you're probably going to see a company like us offering rates somewhere between $3,500 to $4,000 a year for the average home in the Palisades. If you don't do the mitigations on the home, if you don't work together as a community, you'll probably see rates that I would say are closer to maybe $6,000 or a little bit upwards of that. So we're trying as a company to price in what I consider pretty substantial differences and are really trying to lean into giving people and communities a reward for doing what we think are the right things. And again, there's more than one way to get there. And I think that's something that we have a lot of discussion about internally is we're trying to be pragmatic, we're trying to find different options, we're trying to work with homeowners and provide many answers. So you can use IBHS standards, you can use our standards, and our standards are pretty flexible and we have many buckets of that. So we're excited, I think, to be in that kind of a position, but we still feel we have a lot of work to do and a lot of work ahead as we try to understand more of how we can provide better solutions to communities. So that's a big area of investment right now. And
Thank
that's
you
all
so
I have.
much.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you. I gotta say, just I want to personally thank Victor and Dan for showing a different path for insurers in our state that is really grounded in the specifics of California's needs and California's geography, a more nuanced approach to all these different questions, vegetation management, construction, et cetera. So thank you for stepping up and offering insurance to people that are doing the right thing.
Okay, so for my part, I was going to say thank you all for presenting. And yes, thank you to the insurance companies for
I'm just
continuing.
really want to work with you to try to get this work. Thank you to the wonderful, Beth and Julia, your work is helping communities, step up and provide the kind of fire resilient planning that is going to make a difference so that folks like Dan and Victor are ready and willing to step up and insure. So I think there's a virtuous cycle here that I'd really like to see replicated. That I'd like to see us try to implement in the Palisades, and it's part of why I was so excited about getting everyone together today.
Okay, can everyone hear me? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Senator Allen. And yes, for my part, I'd also like to thank everyone who's on this call, but the insurance companies especially for being responsive to our outreach and for always providing some guidance, even if you can't be the ones who provide the insurability. And to that end, Victor, I was wondering if you could, and we'll go into Q&A, but I was wondering if you could address two things. One is the fact that, and this has been touched upon in the chat, one is the fact that people can observe homes going up in the Palisades, homes being framed in wood. And it seems to be cause for alarm because some people think to themselves, rightfully so, how can we be building again with wood if that is not a fire safe material? So can you address that? And then the second thing, can you give us a glimpse of what it looks like from the point of view of insurance companies when they perceive a market to be saturated? So when you've taken all the risk that you can take in a market, and then can you tell us if you just said if we come together as communities, you said if we work together, if we come together as a community, we open up possibilities for insurability. If we do that, if in pockets of these communities, let's say a community like Pacific Palisades where there are different neighborhoods, if these neighborhoods come together in pockets and become more resilient, does that move your saturation needle?
Yeah, sure. I'll answer both questions. So I don't have much concern personally about homes being framed in wood as long as they meet 7A standards. And that really speaks more to everything that's around them. And I would go a little bit further again in saying with the fences, which aren't included in Chapter 7A, as far as I can remember, unless they were really recently updated, you really want that last 5 feet to be dealt with and have non-combustible material there. Now, all that said, I mentioned this in my last town hall where I attended. If you do build your house using Type 1, Type 2 standards, we have an even more significant, our most significant discount is for that. So I do want to be clear that we will go further if you provide you build your house in that manner. We don't view that as an absolute necessity. Again, we're talking about discounts here where we're offering 30, 40%. So we'll insure homes without a discount too. Although we'd love for every house we're insuring to have a discount because that means that they've made the right investments. But you can get a 30, 40% discount if it's framed out of wood, as long as everything beyond that, again, you talk about vents, siding, roof, windows, doors, the deck, the fencing, etc. And you have that zone 0 that is maintained and kind of trimmed down in the right areas. As long as you do those things, you'll be fine. Again, that's just our view. I'm not speaking for anyone but Mercury with that one. On your second question about the community, The more that the community does, the more that companies like us, at least, will write more than what we otherwise would. So we would not normally, and again, this is the extreme example, Dixon Trails and Escondido, we insure 100% of that community. We can't actually we can't write any more homes than that there. We would never write 100% of the homes in a community probably anywhere else unless it has the same standards and it's of a similar size. That 60 homes for a company of our size, if all those homes were destroyed, which we think is incredibly unlikely, but if that did happen, that would not impact our ability to pay claims and be solvent, which is obviously the main priority of an insurance company is we have to stay solvent so we can pay claims. Now, if you talk about a place like the Palisades, where you might have thousands of homes, I can't think of any one company that could realistically insure a very large percentage of the community, even with the mitigation work that we want to see happen. That said, for us, where we have about 7% of the state insured, we might insure maybe double that, maybe more than that in a place in pockets of the Palisades where we see a lot of the work that's being done. So I was in the Palisades about a month ago. I was asked to attend an event. Actually, I don't know if this is technically the Palisades, so I'm sorry if I'm getting this wrong, but it's Sunset Mesa. That might be more Topanga. And there's a network of about 30 residents there that seems interested in building back using concrete and achieving a certain resilience standard. And what I told them, and what I'll say here too, is if you have pockets of homeowners that do that and they do that together and they're near each other and we can model some of that with them, we will go far beyond our normal availability in those areas. So you'll get rewarded both on the pricing side and on the availability side. And we're always going to look for what I feel like are like islands of homeowners that are working together to do the right thing. And again, we want to show up with that with not only coverage, but with discounts. So that's how we look at that one.
Great, thank you. And super quickly, I want to just, before we jump into Q&A, I want to give Beth Burnham and Carrie Carrier a chance to share kind of on the ground how this is all being incorporated into a community right next door to yours. They actually inspired me on this town hall because they really focused on how they can bring the community together on this issue. So I'm just going to pass it over to them just to give a few words.
So thank you very much, everyone. I'm Beth Burnham. And, first of all, my heartfelt just my heart just breaks for everyone who lost their home. That's just such a hard place to start from. So I'm a community organizer for wildfire preparedness, and I've been doing this for the last 15 years. I got my start in Topanga Canyon, where I lived for 20 years, and I was a founding member, and I was co-president of the North Topanga Canyon Fire Safe Council, which is now the Topanga Canyon Fire Safe Council. I wrote and I managed over $365,000 of grants. I created the Home Ignition Zone Evaluation Program that formed the basis for the programs that are at the RCD of the Santa Monica Mountains and at the Santa Monica Mountain Fire Safe Council. With Carrie, I co-led the creation of the Topanga Firewise community. And today, I'm the Firewise Regional Coordinator for Inyo and Mono counties in the Eastern Sierra, where I work really closely with the wildfire county coordinators. So I do this all as a volunteer. It's basically my full-time job, and it's absolutely my passion. And I'm really fortunate because I've really been trained by some of the best in the field, by NFPA, by LA County Fire, by CAL FIRE, and also by Jack Cohen, who Megan mentioned is really the father of home hardening. And so the question that I really focus on is, how do you build a community culture of resilience? And this is really, really important because you've got to put this all in perspective. You guys have gone through an incredibly personal event. But the reality is that 15 of the top fires in the last 20 years. Wait, let me try this again. 15 of the 20 top fires in California history for the destruction of structures have occurred in the last 10 years, in less time than I've been doing my work. And so I am absolutely convinced that the only way, it is only with community engagement and with individual actions that we can change this reality. And that's what drives me. So we've heard a lot about about FireWise versus and fire safe councils, and I really want to try and help you guys understand the differences, because there are some ways in which they're incredibly similar, and there are some ways in which they're really, really, really different. Fundamentally, a FireWise community is a loose community, really a neighborhood organization. It's really easy to run. A fire safe council typically is a formal organization, a 501c3. It's got a board, it's got bylaws, it's got minutes, it's got formal reports that have got to get filed. And it usually involves lots and lots and lots of stakeholders, be they the local fire department, the power company, the water supplier, the Office of Emergency Services. This is a much more complex entity to get off the ground and keep running. I can unfortunately tell you about a lot of burned out fire safe councils. The FireWise community, as you've learned, is used by the California Insurance Commissioner just to really incentivize insurance companies to give a discount. And that is one thing that a fire safe council cannot do. And yet, as a fire safe council, as a formal entity, can accept grant funds. So how does this all work? The fire safe council, FireWise communities really can build the foundation of data. You heard that, so that then you're ready to submit and become an entity that writes grants. So here's a little bit more perspective. In my experience, FireWise communities are really successful grassroots organizations that focus on community building and education. And in California, this is a little bit different than what Megan said. A FireWise community can be as small as 8, which is really like a cul-de-sac. And it can be at the maximum size today is 500. CAL FIRE has said a FireWise community cannot be bigger than 500. Topanga's FireWise community is extraordinarily large. It's bigger than what was the FireWise national maximum. It's the entire community of Topanga of 3,200 residences. Not everyone who's in your FireWise community needs to participate. That's not at all a criteria that's ever looked at. Carrie's going to talk a little bit more about what are some of these criteria. Now, fire safe councils today, in my experience, they're typically larger, much larger, because they're so hard to manage and so much more complex. Maybe a county or a regional versus neighborhood level. And so you've got the Ventura Regional Fire Safe Council, you've got the Santa Monica Mountains Fire Safe Council. And that's that model program, that model slide that Julia put up really characterizes a lot of why that exists. But the thing that's really important is that fire safe councils and FireWise communities coexist together really, really well. And really typically a FireWise community, multiple FireWise communities are under the umbrella of a fire safe council, maybe down the road. Some further thoughts really quickly. The Palisades and Malibu have some really fundamental differences, particularly in the stakeholder department. You've got the city of LA versus the city of Malibu and the county of Los Angeles. The fire departments are really different. The power companies are different. The water suppliers are different. That means that you probably aren't going to be wanting to set up a fire safe council that spans across the Palisades and into Malibu. Just my sense and my recommendation. So my suggestion is that Malibu easily fits under the, for Firewise communities, really fits under the umbrella of the Santa Monica Mountain Fire Safe Council. It already exists. And you guys might want to sort of think, if you want to form Firewise communities, that you start reaching over to the Santa Monica Mountain Fire Safe Council. They are, like me, a regional coordinator. Palisades really probably has to think about more appropriately what is the appropriate fire safe council if they want to create one. But in the meantime, I would tell you to go create Firewise communities. I know that My Safe LA was put up as your contact place. There are other choices, and I'm happy to talk to any of you guys about some of my thoughts about that. So now it's time for Carrie to really share the Topanga process and experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. Excellent. I don't know if I have co-host privileges to share my screen. It's not the end of the world if I can't, but I just wanted to throw some slides up if possible.
You do. Do you want to give it a try?
Yeah, let's give it a try. Fun. All right. Oh, wow. I'm looking at it. Do you guys all see it?
We do see it. I'm just going to flag the time with some Q&A.
Okay, gotcha. I'll be quick.
No worries.
I
Happy to hear from
don't
you.
want to go into great detail. I actually just want to hit the high level because y'all can read as well as I can. So basically, here are the 5 steps, and it only takes 5 steps to become a Firewise community. The biggest step, I would say, the most necessary step, is engaging the community, because that is what's going to ensure your long-term success as a Firewise community, because you have to renew every year. As Beth mentioned, we are the largest Firewise community in the nation at 3,200 homes. I am pleased to report that this is our 5th year of being a Firewise community. And this year we reported $4.8 million in qualifying Firewise activities. And that equates to about $1,500 per home. Interestingly, the majority of those hours and funds went to home hardening, about 53%. 37% went to defensible space, and the balance of about 10% went to education and events. So that's how people are spending their time and their money. Just to get into sort of a few tips on engaging people to start a Firewise community, if you're so inclined to do that. And I would encourage you to do that, because I know for the FAIR plan, people are seeing discounts of between 5 to 10%. Some people are getting 10% discount. So it's a meaningful discount if you are a Firewise community on top of doing your own individual mitigations. Okay, so in terms of galvanizing the group, I've got it up on the screen here. Number 1, I mean, obviously seize the day. As in Topanga, whenever there's a fire in our midst, people get galvanized and they want to feel empowered and they want to do something. So seize that energy to get people focused around what they can do to meaningfully protect their homes and reduce their insurance price and make insurance just available. The other thing I would recommend is to seek out sort of natural local affinity groups. Topanga has a long tradition of fire preparedness and resilience. So we have an arson watch group, we have a CERT group. But in other places where maybe it's not as established, you could work with your Chamber of Commerce, your local neighborhood council, town council, anyone who has a good view into the community's fire risk and who can get people motivated. Other things, designate a leader. Whoever has the broadest reach is well organized and highly motivated. To keep people engaged throughout the year and over time, I'd recommend that you write articles, provide news and data. And then also, have interesting speakers come to your community. People like insurance experts, people like Michael Gollner of Berkeley, who are doing studies to research just how effective various mitigations are in terms of reducing fire risk. Things like that keep people interested in Firewise and give them hard data to basically substantiate your participation in the program, the reason for it. Okay, so in particular, Topanga is a little different from Palisades now, especially now, in terms of the fact that all of your homes, or almost all of your homes, are going to be hardened up to the latest fire standards. That's just going to be a fact of your rebuilding. We still are characterized by a lot of older homes. I say the majority of homes in Topanga are quite old and are not up to snuff. So we have a lot of home hardening to do. So I'm going to bring up a case or an example of a Firewise activity we did that I think is most relevant to Palisades right now. And that would be the basically homeowners or neighborhoods that are adjacent to government-owned land, like state parks land. That has been a stumbling block for a lot of people because state parks is not really required to clear that land, but yet people are penalized if that land is not cleared. In order to clear that land, it's currently or has been an onerous process. To get on state park land, you have to get a permit, you have to pay for the permit, you have a narrow window of time in which you can clear the land. So what we've done in Topanga, one very enterprising community, the Glenview area, they got together with state parks and the Santa Monica Mountains Fire Safe Council to basically get a blanket permit for this neighborhood that was adjacent to the state parks. They all went in there together one day, formed a giant volunteer group and cleared that land, sufficient to meet the standards that the insurance company was putting down in order to get insurance and to qualify for the highest level of discount. So I think that is something that if you become a Firewise community, you could concentrate on those types of activities that will make a meaningful, direct, and immediate impact on your insurance availability and price and risk. Okay. Final thoughts. I guess I just want to leave it at this. I mean, the main reason that I would encourage you to become a Firewise community, regardless of anything else, is to build critical mass. And that critical mass is basically critical mass to achieve community safety. You need a critical mass of homes that are hardened and that have defensible space in order to create the protection we want. We also want to have that critical mass to have market power with our insurance companies and to go to them and say, look what we've done as a community. Please give us a discount. We can substantiate it, provide the data. You can see for yourself. So this helps in that regard. And then lastly, the critical mass helps in getting the political leverage we need in order to get legislative changes and changes with the insurance commissioner to ensure that everybody who is making the effort and spending the money is able to get insurance at a fair and affordable rate. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you so much. I'm going to pass it back to Miriam if you want to go into Q&A.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for all that information. I want to think that a Firewise community is in our future, not too distant future, but I can share and other Palisadians can chime in, but I don't feel like we're at that level of organization just yet. Although I don't know if you can see all the stuff behind me, but we do these community visioning charrettes. We're going to extend those into more community conversations with broader reach. And I hope that this can be something we can bring into the conversation. I also saw Ben Einbinder, who had his hand up for a while. Before I go into the Q&A that I can identify on the chat, I want to give Ben the floor because he's usually super smart and has been super patient. Ben, all you. Are you having trouble unmuting? Let's see. How's that?
Perfect.
There you go.
Thank you. So first of all, Victor, I'm a Mercury customer and just want to say I appreciate how reasonable everyone at Mercury has been to date. My adjuster's been awesome since January 8th. And, I have only good things to say. Obviously, this whole Zoom is set up because we're all focused on whether or not we're going to be able to afford insurance or whether or not it's going to be available when we go back. You talked a little bit anecdotally about what rates could look like on specific types of homes. I think you said 3,000 annually if certain criteria are met, or 6,000 if they're not. I would venture to say that everybody on the Zoom knows far more about their coverages and their policy than they ever wanted to know. And so I will be focused every year on making sure that my dwelling coverage is up to rebuild prices in the market that year, right? Like there will never be another year in my life that I even risk the possibility of being underinsured. The question is, are insurers going to be insuring at that level? Like, will Mercury be ready to insure me at $1,200 a square foot if that's what the market prices are for rebuilds? And I understand that like your premiums are going to be risk adjusted. Your actuaries are going to tell you, if you want this amount of coverage, here's how much annually you're going to need to pay. But the question is it going to be California Fair Plan where I'm going to take the risk on, everything above the cap limit per policy, or are insurers, do you think, you can only speak for Mercury, but do you think they're going to meet the demand for where the actual cost and coverage needs to be going forward so that people aren't underinsured if something like this ever happens again?
Again, I can only speak for Mercury, but the answer would be yes. We do have homes right now that are insured with us for $1,200 a foot. And the rules that we've normally imposed on coverage A, where you talk about price per foot, relate more to setting minimums. We don't have rules about the maximum. Now, there's a point at which if a house in terms of the overall coverage, it gets expensive enough. And I'm talking about homes that tend to sit more outside of our target market, where you get to fairly large homes that are, let's say again, $1,200 a foot. You might reach a point at which we have to do more work to look at the home and be a bit more thorough with it, but we don't have a cap, so to speak, with what you're referencing.
Okay.
I can ask a couple questions that came in from over email. First one is to Senator Allen. Do you know if there are any efforts to create a guidance that can be offered on specific home hardening to increase insurance, like legislation?
Yeah, I mean, this was we had a bill that actually sought to do this, that got stopped by vetoed by the governor actually, because they said they were already working on it at Cal Fire with the CDI. So they say they have a whole set of guidance that's coming out. Um, but this was something. It was a real tension point with the legislature actually over the year on this topic. So I don't know, Victor, what's the latest in terms of the interaction with CDI and the PIF members over kind of a standard, a set of generally agreed upon standards, because they thought that the bill that we'd worked on, the Rubio bill, the one that was, the McGuire Rubio bill was duplicative of their efforts. Do you have any information about what's been happening in those conversations with CDI and the industry?
I do not. No, I don't, unfortunately.
Okay.
Okay. I actually have a question, and it might go to this idea of assessing risk. And Dan, you might be able to answer this. There's two questions. I'm going to try to tack them together. This idea that the model is so far, and I know we've been pressing Senator Allen to change this as a legislator and, wherever else life might take him. But the model right now is that insurance companies look back to assess risk. But if you think about communities, and somebody just mentioned, Justin, what was that community called? Oh, Orchard Hills in Irvine. So communities that burn down build back in a particularly resilient way. So wouldn't the better model be to look ahead in order to assess risk rather than to look back in order to assess risk?
Yeah, I think there's maybe two ways of thinking about looking ahead. One might be, what is the likelihood that a wildfire will reach a certain location? And I think the changes recently around like climate models actually tries to address some of that, which is, we might want to look at models that could predict changes to the landscape or the likelihood that the events may happen. The second is looking at ahead as to what would happen in that event. Effectively, like, would that structure survive if that wildfire got there? And I think that because it's such a dynamic question right now, we are still learning on a weekly and monthly basis about what types of resilience measures will work. I think it almost absolutely has to, if you want the outcome that is lower prices for customers and an incentive to implement resilient measures. I think you want to be able to incorporate a forward-looking view of what would happen on an event. But in some ways, I would argue in some ways, it's not necessarily just a forward-looking view. It's kind of an assessment of the risk physically, not necessarily just like looking forward, if that makes sense.
But do we not have, and somebody just gave the statistic that I don't know, it's like, there was a Politico reporter that sent this to me recently too. It's something like out of the 10 most recent, out of the most destructive wildfires in the last 10 years, a disproportionate number have happened very recently and in our environment. If we take that to be true, and we were to look at a neighborhood like Orchard Hills in Irvine, and I'll tell you why that is a familiar neighborhood to me, because I met someone from CAL FIRE who actually showed me a picture where everything around it had burned and this little pocket had remained green. And so would it stand to reason that we have enough of these examples before us, that have come in the last 10 years, where we can say, if we come together as a community and we actually plan rebuilding in a way that implements community resilience elements, like these barriers that were put in place that mitigated risk. If we know that we can come together as groups and plan these resilient little communities, wouldn't it stand to reason to say that these will do well because we have enough examples in the recent past that show us they in fact do stand up to fire?
Yeah, I think there's.
I mean, is that a new thing to take to the legislature and say, change your mind?
Well, I can start with one thought, and then maybe others can add to the legislative part of it, because I'm not sure I'm the expert there. I think so. There's clearly a lot of good evidence of certain actions being impactful, and certain ones have more evidence than others. The challenge, these events tend to be very episodic and large in nature, so you don't have a lot of different samples over time. So the challenge is that the uncertainty is pretty high. So we know that, zone zero defensible space helps a lot. The question is, by how much? And can you figure out if certain actions can reduce your risk by 90% or 30%? And those differences are really material in terms of how much you will pay for insurance. So I think the answer is you can very likely incorporate much of the evidence today to get some of that benefit. I think the challenge is that you may only get a small fraction of the true benefit for a lot of the things that we're discovering lately, because we haven't been through enough events to see how many of those actions would lead to those results.
Okay.
Miriam, I mean, there's so many questions, but I noticed this one from Nina Goldberg about, I think she's up in the Highlands, and the work that they've done up there to be a Firewise community, and yet they're still stuck with Fair Plan, which, we all know is not real insurance. So, I guess I do want to, I mean, obviously at the heart of the goal here is to try to get communities to do all the things we've been discussing, and then they'll be rewarded with good insurance because they've reduced their risk. But I'd love to get a better sense. I mean, Nina, maybe we can unmute her, or maybe Victor can comment on this, or Dan, but what's the disconnect between, what's been the disconnect between the insurance folks and the neighborhood there in terms of the work on risk reduction and insurance availability?
I don't know if we're going to unmute her
Hi,
first.
hi.
Oh, sorry.
I'm unmuted. Just my question is basically, we actually only purchased our home about 6 weeks prior to the fire, and no insurance would take us other than CFP. And we've worked to become a Firewise community, and we do get a discount with CFP now. But I've still called Mercury, USAA, and a few others, and no one will take us for new insurance. We're still stuck with CFP. So what needs to be done for more insurance to even be available to us?
So I'll answer your question in the chat. I'll give you more context on a few other things that are happening just generally that are driving, in my view, part of the availability issues with companies in general. Okay, so first, maybe I should do it the other way around. So I'll start with just the issues in my mind that create availability issues across the entire state. Insurance companies, and Miriam spoke to this, insurance companies historically have not been able to use forward-looking models when they think about how they're setting their prices in California. They've also historically not been able to recoup their costs for reinsurance in California. In California, until they changed that, which it's in progress right now. So no company has come out the other way with those changes being realized in their rates. I think we were the first one who filed for it, and we're hopeful that by June, we filed for it in August. I think we're hoping that by June we might be out the door and kind of in the market with our new rates. Um, the challenge with this, California was the only state that had these rules, and it was sort of an issue within the industry in that when you look forward, and as it's been stated twice now, most of the worst fires in California have been fairly recent. And I'm not going to go down that road of discussing climate change because I know that has become somewhat of a political issue. But the reality is, in the insurance industry, we believe that things are going to get worse. And if you have to look at the past when you're setting rates, that creates a major disconnect because the past will look better than the future. So insurance companies feel that their rates aren't adequate when you're thinking about the risk prospectively moving forward. In addition to that, we buy reinsurance. We buy insurance that protects Mercury, and all insurance companies do this. We buy reinsurance that protects us against major events like the fires that happened in Los Angeles. We pay over $200 million for that insurance. Until this change is effective, we cannot recoup basically any of that $200+ million expense on $1 billion in revenue. So it's a very, very substantial cost for companies in California. And in the other 49 states, they have a way to recoup that cost. They haven't been able to do that here in California because a long time ago, this predates the current regulatory officials, but a while ago they used to say just take it out of your profits. And I think the issue that insurance companies have in California is if you look at the last 25, 30 years in California, there are no profits. So it's created real issues and it's contributed, I would say, to some real issues for companies in their willingness to write in California. So my view is that as companies get these rates through where they have reinsurance and a forward-looking view of wildfire incorporated, they will be more willing to write in California. Now, it shouldn't be a surprise to people that with that means the insurance rates will go up. I mean, that is a reality of it. What we're trying to do as a company is to blunt the increase by providing much better options from a mitigation standpoint to knock it back down. Because I think you can look at it purely from an insurance company standpoint and say, okay, we have adequate rates now. We can write more homes all over the state. Okay, well, if the communities and the homeowners can't afford them, then we still have a really big problem. So then the focus shifts toward mitigation. And at least for Mercury, we're trying to provide what we feel are, actually, I don't think we just feel this way. I believe they are the steepest wildfire discounts of any major insurance company because we're trying to blunt the impact of the rates and to try to give people a positive feedback loop. Now, going to your more specific question in the chat, one of the discounts we offer is Firewise. It's 5%. Firewise on its own, and I may have said this earlier, Firewise on its own doesn't really mean enough to us. And I don't know, I think the NFPA said this, Firewise is not really meant to be on its own, just a signal to insurance companies that everything is solid. We have to assess what's really happening on the ground in terms of the construction, the defensible space, the field modifications or treatments around the community. And just saying that we're Firewise in and of itself doesn't translate to something we can glean from that tells us about the homes, about the fuels, about the defensible space, about other parts of the infrastructure. So we do work to go literally into the field to assess a lot of those things because we still, at least for us, I mean, Dan's a startup. He might have some cooler ways to get at this. We don't have what we feel are great ways to assess some of those things, sometimes without going in person and seeing it. And we often have communities that will reach out to us and say, hey, come out and see what we've done. And then we go on field trips, we see what's happening, and it gives us a better insight. And then we can offer more insurance, we can offer better rates, we can make changes. I think the insurance industry has talked about something they call a data commons, where they're hoping that over time we can build this really large data exchange where many different entities will contribute what is happening with mitigation on different homes and communities, and everyone can kind of see it on the same page. But unfortunately, there's not some kind of master list out there that tells you what all these homes have done with all those characteristics I talked about earlier, and with the fuel treatments. You kind of have to scrape some of that together still. And that's okay with us, but it's not as quick as we'd like it to be. So I'd be happy to go out to your community with my team and take a look at what's going on there and see if there's more that we can do to provide a better service to you and your neighbors.
Thank you,
So that
Victor. I'd love
actually
to.
brings up,
Maybe I can come join you there. One of the questions that's jumped up on the chat is just the whole question of fuel in the wildlands next to communities. And I'd love it if, I don't know if one of the either Dan or Victor or one of our friends from from working on the Fire Safe Council or Firewise communities, can you speak to some best practices here? Because Ben, for example, there's all these balances we have to figure out here. Obviously, we want to reduce fire risk. We don't want to see what happened in the Palisades ever happen again. We also know that state parks are there to preserve natural beauty and outdoor recreational experiences and wilderness protection for the future. And so, do you see have you seen good examples around the state where they've struck a good balance, in terms of fuel management in parklands near communities?
Is that a question? I can share the Orchard Hills example. I think is a good example where they've done a good job in creating what they call field modification zones and a lot of the green space around the community. That may not be transferable to everybody, but I think that there are examples like that in the state that are really helpful to look at. Tahoe's done some pretty good work as well. When they had the Caldor fire years ago, the height of the flames was over 100 feet, which it's pretty scary. It was pretty intense. Once it got to the areas that they had treated, it fell dramatically, and then they were able to stop the fire outside the neighborhood. And the work that they do now, which they call in the northeastern part of Tahoe, they call the worm. It's this section that is 132 feet wide of field that they clear. We'd probably like to see people go a little bit wider than that, but that's still fantastic. So there are examples throughout the state, and some of which I visited personally, where they've found a way to do this. And I think that the really important thing with this is where sometimes I think there's more opportunity as a state to think about how we want to do things over time. At times, there is funding that's allocated and granted to do field treatments once. And that's usually the most expensive treatment, the first one that you do when you have decades of buildup of fuels. What sometimes becomes less predictable is how are we going to continue to maintain that? So I think from an insurance standpoint, we love to see the first step. We do want to make sure that the community or the municipality or whomever's involved can think about the ongoing maintenance of that, because the maintenance is pretty cheap, relatively speaking. And when we insure homes, we're planning on being there for a while. So we hope to see that there's some kind of ongoing effort every 3 to 5 years, maybe even shorter, depending on the kind of fuel, to continue to manage it. But there are examples throughout the state, and it's something perhaps I could follow up with later on. We have like an internal list of a lot of these that we look at and that we've assessed.
I think there's
I saw
also,
Beth.
Yeah,
Sorry,
can
go
I?
ahead.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Dan, you want to step in?
no, please.
I also just want to say that Hank has a question, and I think someone else had their hand raised, and then Justin dropped into the chat. I think something I'd like everybody to address before we break is just the issue of undergrounding power lines. Is that a thing? Is that something that insurance
can I
companies
can I
look at?
respond to that fuel question?
Please,
Sure.
please, because you're next to Topanga State Park too.
Yeah. So, I've worked a lot with Topanga State Park, and now in the Eastern Sierra, I work, with a lot of communities where fuel around the community is really, really critical and